Okay.
What I have here is a posting from Dublin, Trinity College, which was posted some years ago, advice for students how to do research. Now they say, and I agree, research is handled at 4 stages: to know what and how to do it, and to make it known. I will talk today about the red ones, the 2nd and the 4th, about what and how to do research and how to make it known. Because to make it known and to do it are 2 different things, really. You know, there are people out who do a very good job in research, but they have no talent to publish it, to make it known. Then it may get lost, okay? And there are people who do it vice versa, who are very good in writing, but having not a big material to show. We say they turn a mouse into an elephant in such a case. So you have to be good at both, good at doing research and good in publishing it. It's equally important. Otherwise, if you cannot publish, if you don't know how to write well, nobody will know your good work. So before you start writing, you have to do a few more things, okay? You have to define first your topic. There are a number of issues, and of course, this defining of topic is very important, because you will work on this topic for the next 3 to 6 years, depending on where you are, right? Working on your, so it's very important to do a good job there. So first you have the width of the topic. The topic should be broad enough to address important and interesting issues, but also narrow enough to be able to address the topic in the time allowed or allotted. And you have to understand that as you get into your topic, it seems to be getting bigger and bigger over time. In the beginning, it may look very narrow and small, but as you get into it, it gets bigger. So you should consider this. Also, you have to understand the limitations of your situation, your personal situation, your own capabilities, of course, your motivation. Do you have already some experience in this topic? Do I have to take additional classes? How about supervision? Do I have an advisor who is around? You always will have an advisor, of course, but he may be away most of the time, which is not good. What kind of lab work do you do? What kind of equipment? How do I depend on others? There are many questions which you should check in order not to get into an environment which is not good for you. And you have to do some previous readings. Make sure that you understand at least roughly what you are getting into, and that you understand the state of the art of the issue also, at least to a certain extent. You will not understand at this point everything, but you should have an overview. Then you should create a timetable. If you don't do it on paper, you should have it in your brain. You should be able to coordinate it with your other commitments. How much time do you have per day? Do you have a job on top of it, in addition to your PhD work, research work? Or how much time do you have? And this is also very important. How often do you have to travel, or do you have to travel at all in the course of your PhD work? Then there are the reading strategies. Reading, of course, is very important when you do a PhD. In the beginning, although I said you should do some previous reading, you will still not know exactly what you are looking for in the beginning, because research is never fully plannable, you know. That's why we distinguish between research and development, R&D. In development, you have a strategy which you can expect will lead to some positive result. In research, not necessarily so. In research, it can happen that you even fail, okay? That you find out something which is not doable. But this is also a result. This is also a useful result. If you can show this way of doing things is the wrong one. But anyway, in the beginning, you don't know what the outcome will be. So reading goes in 3 stages. First, you read to explore. Then you should read to focus. And finally, you should read to understand the details of the previous work that has been done. You also should read critically. Because research is not about believing, it's about asking questions. And you should get to the primary sources, because it can happen that over time a certain topic issue is being misinterpreted by secondary, tertiary sources and so forth. So try to get the original publication when you do reading. And read critically. Don't believe that everything is correct, what is written black on white, okay? I understand that this is a big problem for a beginner because you don't have the experience to distinguish between good stuff and bad stuff. But it's very important. You must learn it. And of course, you have an advisor who has much more experience than you have, so you can discuss these issues with him. And you should read always. You can never do enough reading, especially if you do a PhD thesis. You should actually finally, after finishing, you should know more about the topic than anybody else, including your advisor. This always took as a criterion, as an advisor. If my PhD student didn't know more than I do, he was not ready yet. Because, you know, the guy studies for 5 years on a very narrow topic, while the advisor has maybe many PhD students covering many topics. So if you focus completely on this topic for a long time, you should know a lot about it. Also very useful is write down things as you research. Don't research for 5 years and then try to write your thesis. Take note as you read, as you work, summaries, short reactions, because you can easily forget things over time. And if you take notes, then you have already substantial material for your thesis, which you have to write later. Also, very often in some countries, like I think in China, you have to publish 1 or more papers, peer-reviewed papers, before you can complete a PhD thesis. So you have to publish and write anyway and get some experience. Take also advantage of other people's writing skills and experiences. In those papers, you may have co-authors, more experienced people, maybe even your advisor as a co-author. So make use of them and learn. Don't make the same mistakes again and again. This happens occasionally. As an advisor, you teach a student, don't do this, don't use this formulation. And in the next paper, it's there again. So try to avoid it. Learn from the discussion with your advisor. Maybe you want to use a language editing service because we all, or I should say most of us, are not, have not English as a native language. So we all have some kind of deficiencies, more or less. So there's nothing wrong to use a language editing service, because bad language also will be considered a bad paper. Don't forget it, you know. So generally, writing helps focusing and clearing issues. It's my personal experience, for instance, when I write something down, I understand the problems much, much better. And I realize that those things are missing and I have to do more or whatever. So it helps focusing and clearing issues. Also, in addition to writing, presenting helps very much. This is another way. If you have to put together a presentation, you are forced to write, you are forced to think deeper and longer about your problem, as if you just have it in your brain, you know. So presentations should be started in your own group. I don't think it will work when you go to a group of 1,000 people with your very first presentation. You are probably afraid, you are nervous, you may fail, you may not understand the questions in the discussion, and so forth and so forth. So it's always a good idea to start small with presentations in your own group where your colleagues, your friends have the same problems that you have before you go out in front of so-called big shots. Huh? In many places, the defense of a master or PhD thesis also includes presentations anyway. So be prepared for this. Be prepared to give presentations. And it helps also in the process of doing research. Now I have guidelines and tips how to do it. I don't go through all the details here, it's too much. You can, by the way, download my presentation and study it in detail. Towards the end, I have lots of additional information which I'm not covering here, but you can download web pages and so forth and do some more studies on the issue. So first to the layout of the thesis. Usually for a PhD thesis, sometimes even for master thesis, the layout is given by the institution, okay? So there are topics like size of page margins, line spacing, format of table, numbering system, and these are all formalities which you should find out as early as possible. It saves you time. Not that you write in a different or in a free format and then you have to turn everything into this requested layout. So get the layout. Where do you get it? In your library, student office, graduate school, advisor. And a very good idea is also to get a thesis which was already written by a colleague of you before. But it should be a good one, okay? Take it as an example and follow this hopefully good example. Then you have the structure of the work. The structure usually also is quite unique, you know, it's not necessarily so, but that's the way people are doing it. There's a title page, there's an abstract, there's a list of contents, then list of tables, diagrams, illustrations, maybe nomenclature list, acknowledgements, and don't use too many acknowledgements, it gets boring, only the most important ones. Then you have the main text. And the main text includes the introduction to the research, why do you do it, motivation, objectives. Then you have also very important to review the works that has to be done before, because you never will start at zero. There have been always people who have worked on the topic already. You should give credit to them. The methodology has to be proposed and described. And then you have to show the main results. And finally, you need a concluding chapter, summarizing the main findings, statements about the main contributions, and also don't forget recommendations for future work, because usually you will not, not close a topic with your work. There will be issues left over which need future work, maybe by other people. Then you need a list of references and appendices. Yeah, what do you put into appendices? Everything which is important, but which would disturb the flow of reading, you know. So large tables, calculations, background information, lengthy derivations, people usually put into the appendices separately as an option for the reader to read it really or not to read it, okay? So my tips are spend enough time in planning the structure as early as possible. Get, again, which I said before, get copies of other good theses, talk to your advisor, and important, write abstract and introduction last. Because in the beginning, you, as I said before, you will not know what is the result of my research, because research is not plannable, remember? So introduction, you cannot write in the beginning. If you can, what you are doing is not research really, something else, maybe development, okay? So write it last. Flow of contents. This is, they say writing a thesis is like writing a novel. There must be some internal logic. This is of course a bit difficult for somebody who has little or no talent in writing. This you must learn somehow really, because if your text is confusing, very often text is very, how you say, the author jumps, you know? It's not smooth reading, it's very jumpy, jumps from one topic to the other. Then the examiner will get lost or will get tired very soon and will react with low marks, okay? So make sure your text is not confusing. And here I have a number of tips, like avoiding repetitions. Very often, for instance, you read the same sentences in the abstract and in the introduction. That's not good. Don't copy your, even if it's your own sentence, don't copy your own sentence several times. If you want to express the same fact, use a different formulation. And especially, which is even worse, don't copy other people's sentences. Now with the internet and digital data, it's very easy to call up a paper and copy sentences which somebody else wrote into your own work. Your advisor will notice this, you know, because he will see all of a sudden the style of the writing is changing. So he will nail you down. So you will not get through with this one, and it's not a good idea. And also really focus on your subject. Very often people try to bring everything together, write 250 pages and 300 references and so forth. This is not good, not good. Focus on your topic. Don't act like a chicken. You know, a chicken all day long is picking here, picking there. There's no straight path you should have, okay? Then there are more tips how to get a good flow of content. These are details which you should read through. We don't have here the time to go into all the details. Now the abstract first. The abstract, as I said, should be written last. And it should be written in a different style. It should be written in a punchy style to attract the reader, because there may be a reader who only read your abstract or first read only abstract. And if they find it interesting, they will continue. If they get the impression, oh, abstract, very boring, very boring, they will not continue to read. You know, you can, like they say, you can piss them off easily. So abstract should be punchy. It provides the reader with a summary of the contents, should be brief, but still contain enough detail about the topics I listed here: motivation of work, the objectives, methodologies, main results and conclusions. And the abstract should be self-contained. Like I said, somebody who only reads abstract, he wants to know the whole story from the abstract. Introduction, basically the same or similar thing. Okay, you have more space, of course, in the introduction, but you will write it last. You should write it also in a punchy style, that the guy who only reads the introduction does not go away, but thinks, oh, that's very interesting what he has been doing or she. Let's read the whole thesis. Literature review. And again, literature review, it's not the issue of putting together as much as you can, but focus on the most important ones, the key publications, and go back in time, get primary sources. Some people, in some papers, you read only publications from, let's say, the last 5 years. Or in other cases, maybe the last 5 years are even not included, which means this may not be an interesting topic anymore if nothing has been published. So keep it confined to topics really relevant to your own work. Don't try to show off by citing too many authors. I always used in an exam, PhD exam, I opened the literature and I asked the guy, what was this author writing? Okay, so I could check if he really read the work or the paper or just listed it for the sake of completeness. So don't miss the latest developments. Don't miss the international developments. Science is international, like coronavirus, the same thing. There's no Chinese virus. There's no Chinese science or American science. So scan, and nowadays it's very easy. I mean, 30 years ago, it was not so easy to get hold of all international publications, but nowadays with the internet, it's quite easy. And also, like I said, make sure you understand what you have cited. Like, if your examiner, your advisor comes and asks you, what did this guy write here? And you don't know the content, then you are in a bad shape in the exam, okay? So you should know what's in the publication if you cite it. Conclusions, a similar issue like abstract and introduction. Again, there are people who read conclusions, only conclusions at first instance. And again, if they find it interesting, they go back to the main part, to the main text. So what do you put into the conclusions, the main findings? The critical, and emphasis is on critical analysis of results. And what is really new, if you claim you have done something new, and point out where did you achieve progress as compared to other people, and give some directions for further research. So please clearly distinguish your own work from other people's work and present your conclusions concisely. Write in a punchy style like abstract and introduction. Now here you can take this as a checklist, 9 steps to develop an efficient draft of your manuscript. I skip it, okay, for the sake of time. Some checkpoints to consider. Now this one you can really take practically, and you can compare what you are doing with these checkpoints. You know, most of these checkpoints are formulated as questions, and you can give the answer yourself, yes or no. And if it's no, then you should add some work. body, the same issue, a number of checkpoints to consider, conclusions, checkpoints to consider. And as I said before, remember, conclusions and introduction together should be self-sufficient. That's my daughter calling. Wait a minute. Gudrun, kannst du hingehen, bitte? Okay. And these are details now. These are details, generalities, which again, I'm not touching now. Generalities, checkpoints. So it's good to think of a thesis as a series of small related tasks, not just as one task. Like I said in the very beginning, write whenever you can, whenever you have done something, achieved something or not achieved something, write it down. Do not think I have to write a whole thesis, but write it in pieces over time and at the end stitch it together. Don't write a big piece at a time. And I just repeat, start to write as early as possible, even if it's only a random thoughts, because over the time, 3 to 5 years, people forget things easily. Try to write 15 minutes every day. This may not be possible, but it would be a good idea if you could do this. But I'm aware this is not possible. There are days where you can write longer and days where you have no time. But I only want to say you should write permanently. And then you should know and understand that you are not alone. There are hundreds, thousands of people worldwide who are in the same situation. So you are not isolated during the thesis process. If you have problems, fears, doubts, have to discuss result, talk to other people. Even if you cannot visit them in the office like here, you can use Skype, you can use other platforms for discussions. No? Communicate with other people, other students, people who also write thesis, and advisors. Share suggestions how to overcome obstacles. It's very important. Don't stay isolated, don't stay alone. You may wish to take a course on technical writing if this is your problem, the writing, the language. Writing is to a large amount a skill which can be learned, okay? It's a skill which can be learned up to a certain point, of course. If you want to get a Nobel Award on your writing, you need more than skills. And a writer's block has been treated here by Cheryl. Don't endure a writer's block. This happens to professional writers also. It's not a disease. There's, we call it a total block and a partial block. Don't suffer, get advice as early as possible because it can get worse over time. There's a thing called deadline anxiety, which gets worse and worse the closer the deadline comes, okay? So don't get into such a situation. Look for help early enough. And this is the best part of thesis writing. I talked about a lot of problems now, which you have to solve. But finally, if you are finished, you will see it was a rewarding experience. It was a challenge and an opportunity to pursue intriguing intellectual questions in a stimulating environment, which you may not get anymore later on in your job. The job usually is more one-dimensional. In the university, you can develop yourself also sidewards. And you worked in close cooperation with experienced people, your advisor, senior researchers. And hopefully you will have a great feeling of satisfaction after completing the job. So there's a good part in thesis writing as well. Now I'm through. As I said, there's more material coming later on, which you can check. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.